Hello, I wanted to go ahead and have a conversation about the domains of learning. It is somewhat abstract, and I admit it's not the easiest in terms of concepts to learn. I think to break it down, though, is really important. And let me just backtrack a little bit and tell you why we're teaching the domains of learning. You are going to be educators. You're going to educate patients on their well-being and how to get better and how to not be um, not be sick anymore in some cases, and really how to regain their life back or to adjust to their new reality. So as an educator, it's important to, especially when working with somebody who is learning how to walk again or learning how to move in a totally different way than they're used to be able to kind of look at the big picture in terms of learning to better help you in terms of having better outcomes regarding the patient achieving their short-term goals and really building rapport with the patient and getting them better faster. And I think that's really important. Not that we rush treatments and rush them to get better. We can't jump steps in terms of the domains of learning, but to be able to kind of get a full picture of that patient and to help them reach to higher levels of learning. So learning is, there's so many factors that go into learning. You think about yourself sitting in a chair or sitting behind a computer listening to me. Certainly your atmosphere contributes to your learning, your ability to hear, your ability to see, whether you have multiple things on your mind at once, whether you're on your cell phone while trying to learn, whether you have multiple windows open and trying to dual task, which you'll eventually learn doesn't happen. We may think we can dual task, and yes, we can walk and talk and walk and chew gum at the same time, but that's not the same as dual tasking where you're in the sense of, that is dual tasking, but it's not in the sense of what people claim they're doing when they're multitasking. Dual tasking and multitasking are two different things, and I don't think multitasking is done well at all. If it was done well, why are there so many accidents when people are driving and on their cell phones? Because they're not paying attention. They're not able to pay attention. So my point is, creating an environment that is conducive to learning is really important. And that may mean creating a soft music sound in the background. If you have kids, having someone help you with the kids or have them in some activity, if they're with you where they're engaged, and which will allow you to study. Sometimes learning is about having an experience. I think this is not always the best way to learn. It's actually can be a very painful way of learning. However, I think it's okay at times to let a patient recover, and you'll learn more about this in further coursework, meaning that if a patient starts to fall over, to allow them to recover without you pushing them back up, unless it becomes a dangerous situation where you physically have to grab them to keep them from falling. That's different, but in terms of helping the person and facilitating movement, that's what you're going to be doing. And so that actually can be a good way to learn, as long as no one's injured, no one's fallen on the ground, which is not a good way to learn. And then talking about the experience, what did you learn? What muscles were you able to turn on to keep yourself from falling, for example? Or why was this not a good learning experience? The patient may say, it was just really busy in the clinic. I heard a lot of noise and a lot of conversations, and I really couldn't concentrate on what you were telling me. And there just wasn't equipment available for me to participate in therapy. So that's really good feedback. It may not be feedback you want to hear, but it's really good feedback for you to discern and ruminate on, for lack of a better term, so you can create a better learning experience for that patient the next time. And then concluding from the experience, what did you learn? Uh, in this example, I say the hot water burns skin. Well, yes, and it's very painful and can cause damage to the skin. So I really like the example I threw out there. I mean, I don't need to read it to you. I do have an audio that helps you with the audio with the learning. I did record that a few years ago. That doesn't mean it's not relevant. It's incredibly relevant. I think there's some really good links to the domains of learning. So really focus on the simplest to the most complex in each domain. So for example, if we're going to pull up the cognitive, so what is the more simplest would be knowledge. And then after that is comprehension, and application, and analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So what does that mean? All right. So you can see that in these original domains, right, in the revised domains, it really, I think, has some really good examples. Now, what I said is the original categories from simplest to most complex. The original categories, not the revised categories. I think what they do here is, in terms of the revised categories, is they're not bad, right? But we're not focusing on the revised categories of Bloom's taxonomy. We're focusing on the original. The cognitive domain, this is learning and development of intellectual skills. You start out with knowledge. You receive knowledge, whether that's about physical therapy, for example. So you receive knowledge about different aspects, for example, of physical therapy practice. You take time to comprehend them, which is the next step of learning. Then you apply them to a real patient in terms of intervention. Then you analyze whether that intervention was effective or not, and you synthesize with other interventions to see if that's actually achieving the goal that you have for the patient or the PT set. And finally, the evaluation, which I will call assessment, because PTAs do not evaluate, but you do assess, and you assess, how did that go? Did the patient get that concept that you were trying to teach them, that new exercise or that new way of movement? And if not, you may have to step back and go back to what was missing. And what was missing may have been the intervention piece. Or if you were just unsure what you're doing entirely, then you may have to go back to the knowledge and start all over again. I would hope that you wouldn't apply an intervention without having a strong knowledge base. But sometimes we need to step back. So I hope that helps you kind of get through these a bit. It's actually quite rich, and I really love it. You have some really good little Quizlets, is what they're called, where you now or assess how you learned. And I think the Seinfeld video is really funny, but it's also quite rich in applying Bloom's taxonomy in terms of some of the characters and episodes from Seinfeld, which was a very popular comedy series in the late 80s and throughout the 90s. So have fun with this, and I look forward to your feedback and seeing how your comprehension is of this material, as well as your application and assessment regarding these steps within these different areas: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor.